Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to another edition of Real Spiritual Talk Radio. I am your host, Lamont Gates, once again bringing you the world of faith, metaphysicality, and spirituality. Today, my guest had a near-death experience while on the battlefield during the Vietnam War. Joining me today, ladies and gentlemen, is near-death experiencer Mr. Bill Vandenbush. Bill, welcome to Real Spiritual Talk Radio.
Thank you, Lamont. It's nice to be here.
I was glad to have you on. Now, I understand, Bill, you had your near-death experience during one of the most popular wars, or actually, depending who you ask, unpopular wars in American history. Is that so?
That's correct.
Okay, and yeah, we will get into that shortly, especially into the specifics and the details of that. But before we do, I typically like to go back and get acquainted with my guests' religious belief systems or religious affiliations, if applicable. Prior to having your near-death experience, was there any religion in your household or religious or spiritual beliefs you held?
My mother was a Protestant, and my father was a Catholic. My father did not go to church or didn't stay with the church very much. And my mother tried taking me to church, but I found I just found it to be not very believable, to be honest with you. Um, so I visited churches with my friends who had other than Christian beliefs, and I kind of found that they were all saying the same thing. And there were a lot of negative things going on in the church. Nothing that specifically happened to me, but the pastors getting in trouble with parishioners, and uh, so I just kind of said, "This isn't for me. I'm not going to be following any religion." Um, but I was always kind of a spiritual person. I always believed um, that we had a spirit and that there was some kind of higher power.
Yeah, and it sounds like on that battlefield in Vietnam, you came into full contact with this particular power. But before we actually get into your near-death experience, talk to us a little bit about what led to it. How did you get into the Vietnam War, for example?
When I was a young man, a teenager, um, this was in 1968. I was a war protester, and I was coming back from a protest one day and realized that I don't even know where Vietnam is. I'm protesting this war, but I don't really know anything about it. And so I thought, well, I need to find out. So I went and joined the military. And in March of 1969, I was inducted into the U.S. Army and went through all the training, infantry training and basic training, and was eventually sent to Vietnam.
And I'm assuming you were a young kid. You were about 18, 19 years old when you entered the war. Is that so?
That's correct. I was 18 years old, and just, I mean, uh, not real smart, like most 18-year-olds. And I was, kind of a naive kid when it came to some things. But I grew up in that John Wayne generation when going to war made you a man. It made you, uh, it was kind of a rite of passage, being in the military and going to war. So I felt like it was something that I should do. I didn't feel bad about joining the military. Um, but I did join and volunteered to go to Vietnam.
Well, take us to that fateful day when you are on the battlefield and you realize that you've been hit and you are no longer in Vietnam anymore.
All right. When I was, after I went to Vietnam, we went through training. I went to Vietnam. I was an infantry soldier. I saw a lot of death and dying. I mean, there was from the first week I was there on. I mean, it was an overwhelming amount of people dying and taking lives. Um, as an 18-year-old, it was mentally and emotionally uh, very stirring, very, um, it was difficult to cope with, to think about what was happening. And I'd been there about 10 months in combat. I saw a lot. I went from being an 18-year-old. I had my 19th birthday, um, was just beyond my 19th birthday. And I was sent out on a mission. My two best friends went on R&R that day. So I was essentially by myself. And we had always vowed that as long as we were together, nothing could happen to us because we would kind of watch each other's back. But they were gone. And the company commander put me in charge of a squad of men to go out and find a downed helicopter. And I said, that we could do this, and I picked half a dozen men to go with me, men that I knew could handle this kind of mission. And they took about two other squads, and we all got on helicopters and flew to the place where this other helicopter had been shot down. And when we got there, I knew that this was going to be a very difficult day. I knew that something unusual was going to happen. And as I got myself and my men off the helicopter, we immediately started taking fire. They were shooting at us from all sides. The helicopters took off and got out of there. And the company commander motioned to me to move my men around the base of this hill, while he and his men and the other squads went the other direction, and we'd meet up on the other side so that we'd kind of come in around this downed helicopter and could clear the area so that we could get in there without being shot and killed. But we took heavy fire as soon as I moved my men around the side of the hill. We took fire up to a place of safety so that I could stay back a little bit, kind of in a little dip in the ground, and direct their fire so that they could keep the enemy at bay and and keep us in a situation where we weren't going to get overrun. Um, After fighting for probably 10 or 15 minutes, I heard some jet planes come over, and I realized that the company commander must have called in an airstrike, which means that he was pinned down the same way we were. When I saw the planes fly over and I saw them drop their first load of bombs, those bombs hit the side of the hill. And I thought, well, that if they drop those bombs a little bit earlier, they're going to fall right on top of my position. And here I was, 19 years old, scared, uh, kind of out there by myself. And I saw the planes go around, and I saw them come back, and I saw them drop the bombs. And I knew when the minute they released the bombs that they had let them go too early, and they were going to come right down on my position. And they did. And I was blown up by the bomb and hit in the face by a large piece of shrapnel that crushed the right side of my face and tore out my right eye. And I'm lying there on the ground, and I know that I'm very badly wounded. And I'm thinking about, this is it. This is the end. Uh, I finally get to go home, although it's most likely in a box. But at least I'm done with this crazy war. And I thought, I haven't really had much experience in life. Um, I'd never been married or had a family, any of the things that I thought that I would grow up and have. Um, so I was lying there on the ground thinking, there's just not much I can do. And there's no mom here to kiss it and make it better. And suddenly I was in a dark space in a corridor. It seemed like I was surrounded by this darkness, but there seemed to be um, a containment to it. And I'm moving forward, kind of forward and upward, just kind of gliding. I'm still in my body. I'm still wounded, but I didn't feel pain. And I wasn't really worried about what was going to happen. And suddenly I came out in this bright white light. And it was so peaceful, so calm, so beautiful. It was all this unconditional love and caring. And I wasn't really sure what to think about it. I mean, it was uh, the most spectacular thing I've ever seen in my life. And as I was just standing there taking it all in, this ball of energy came over to me, and I recognized it as my grandfather. And my grandfather had died about 5 or 6 years prior to that. And he came to me and said he was going to take me in and show me around. And I felt comfortable with him, and I felt that, um, I recognized him immediately, even though he wasn't in human form. I knew he was my grandfather. It's an odd thing that this energy is so specific to specific human beings, so much so that you can recognize it, even when it's not in human form. And as we were moving in, another being came out of the light, another ball of energy. And I didn't recognize this ball, but knew that it was an advanced being. It was, a person in charge, and that I had to go back. I couldn't stay there. And told me that I would return to a long and productive life, and that no matter what happened on this day, I would not die. Uh, it also told me that I had a purpose in life, but wasn't really clear exactly what that purpose was, but indicated that I would figure it out along the way. And so, being a good soldier, rather than fight it, I accepted the order to leave and turned and moved away and back in the dark corridor, moving downward. Again, still wounded, but not feeling any pain. And I was surrounded by this white light. I mean, it was just all around me. And when I arrived back on the battlefield, I could suddenly hear the gunfire and I could hear people yelling. And I thought I'm back here on this battlefield, but I'm surrounded by this white light and I don't feel any fear or pain or concern or worry about where I am or what's going to happen. And one of my men came crawling over to me. He had seen that I'd been wounded. And when he arrived, he was wounded. He had been shot trying to get back to help me. And I took him in my arms and I took his pack off and laid him down. And I realized that he was going to go where I just came from. And I just looked him in the eyes and said, it's going to be okay. Everything's going to be all right. And the next thing I know, there's this, it's like a cloud of fog, very light, but I could see it. And it rose up out of his body. And I knew that then he was going to that place, the place where I came from. I also knew that he wasn't going to come back. And I was unsure why I came back. It just seemed like he wasn't wounded as badly as I was. But I laid him down and I covered him up. And I yelled at my men to stay where they were. And I was going to go get help. And as I started to get up off the ground to get help, a sniper came out of the bushes and opened up on full automatic and hit me 5 times. Shot me through the upper arm, the chest, and through the neck. I couldn't speak anymore. I had blood gushing out of me. When they fired the gun, I was close enough. I could see the bullets come out of the gun and go into my body. But I was still surrounded by the white light. I wasn't afraid. I wasn't worried. I didn't think I was going to die because this being in the white light told me that no matter what happens, I'm going to live on this day. So I picked up my rifle and I fired back. I don't know if I hit the guy, but I'm sure I scared the heck out of him. After seeing me all wounded and then shooting me 5 times, and I pick up a rifle and fire back. I mean, that's got to be frightening. And somehow, in this white light, I could see above me and around me 360 degrees. I could see where the other men were, the company commander and his men, because that's where the medic was and the radio man. And I made my way through the bushes and through the hedgerows to that area. And as I came out of the hedgerows and I'm walking towards them, I just heard these gasps and men came running over to me. And as soon as they put their hands on me, all this white light and this view from above. I had been watching myself. I had been helping myself breathe so that I didn't drown in my own blood. And all of that just kind of went back inside of me. And I laid down and I could hear them in a panic yelling, we've got to get an airway in. We've got to watch out for that left arm. Um, we've got to be very careful. And within a short time, they put me on a helicopter and sent me to a series of field hospitals. And eventually, I ended up on a hospital ship in Da Nang Harbor, which was quite a ways north of where we were. But all this time, all along, the white light was with me. It didn't leave me. I was surrounded by it. I was comforted by it. It was um, it was a part of me, and it has been ever since. And I've had numerous other near death and other similar types of experiences along the way. I mean, this all happened 55 years ago. So um, the fact that it's still this vivid in my mind, I can't remember dreams from 55 years ago. And, sometimes dealing with mental health professionals and such, they always say, well, it was just a dream. It was just the brain's way of coping with all the pain. And I thought, no, it was more than that. It was so much more than that. But I was afraid to talk to people about this um, because they didn't seem to be very interested. When I tried to talk to people about it after I got back home, which by the way took uh, many months before I was physically able to be shipped back home. Um, but no one seemed to want to talk about the near death thing. They were willing to talk about what happened in combat and, what my other experiences were. Uh, but they didn't want to hear about that near death experience. So remember, this was like 1969, 1970, even with all of the awakening that was happening at that time, this was still kind of way out there. And so I didn't talk about it for 20 years, but it was always vivid in my mind. But I really didn't want to talk about it. It wasn't until 20 years later I was uh, in graduate school, and the professor said, I was a course called Confrontation with Living and Dying. And the professor said, I want you to get in small groups and talk about your most profound experience with death. And I thought to myself, do I really want to tell this story or not? And I did. I opened up and I told the story, and people were very accepting, understanding. The professor was very excited and said, what you had is a near death experience. And that was the first time I heard that term. I'd never heard the term near death experience prior to that. So this was kind of an eye opener for me. And I thought, well, it felt good to tell this story. So maybe I'll tell it again somewhere. And the professor was telling me about this group called the International Association for Near-Death Studies, and they meet in Seattle. I was living in Washington State, still living in Washington State. But he said they have groups that meet and talk about these kind of things. And I thought, well, yeah, being a guy, I just kind of put it off and said, that's all right. I told it once, I can just let it go now. Of course I couldn't, um, but a couple weeks later, they took me up to Seattle, and I was arrived a little early and went into the meeting room, and there were a lot of chairs lined up. Uh, and I thought, oh, there can't possibly be that many people coming. And I met Kimberly, and she said, well, do you want to tell your story today? And I said, no, I'll just sit and watch. I was always kind of a shy guy anyway. Um, and so the meeting started, the room just filled up. I mean, there was like 150 people came in there, and so Kimberly's opening the meeting, and she said, well, we have some new people here, and said, raise your hand if this is your first time here. And I raised my hand, and she went on about some other business. She said, well, I would like to call a new person to come up here and talk to us because I understand that person has an interesting story. And she called my name. And I thought, I just told you I didn't want to do this, and you called my name anyway. So, being a polite person, I got up and I sat up on the stage and I told my story. And within, I don't know, a couple of months, I was doing uh, conferences and doing videos and appearing on television and radio. I was having newspaper and magazine articles written about me. Um, it was quite overwhelming, but it was also quite cathartic to be able to tell this story and have people listen and care about it.
Yes, absolutely. I have a number of follow-up questions. Your story is very riveting. And with that said, my first question to you revolves around these bombs being dropped. It sounds like this was friendly fire that kind of took you out. Is that so?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. It just,
US,
people talk
Navy.
about Vietnam and they talk about the enemy, but sometimes the enemy may come from our own side.
Yeah, it was friendly fire. It was a Navy plane. I mean, they didn't, they're flying by at, God, I don't know how fast they go, but, and they're trying to drop the bombs and everything. They're trying to calculate when to drop the bombs. They can't actually see us down there. Um, so, I mean, they're doing the best they can to help us out. And, it just happened that the bombs fell right on my position.
Yeah, it's another interesting aspect of the Vietnam War that a lot of people probably don't hear about. But then when you're hit, you talk about going into this place of darkness. And you said you were gliding through this place. Did it feel like a tunnel to you of some
Yeah,
sort?
it was like a dark tunnel. Um, it was like riding an escalator. I was just kind of, I didn't feel like I had control, that I had to just kind of go along with wherever it was I was going. Um, and it seemed to be gliding slightly upward. And when I came back out, I was gliding slightly downward.
Yeah, it's very interesting because in this dark tunnel where you were gliding upward and downward, you also said you felt no pain, there was no worry, and you came out of this bright light. A lot of near-death experiencers talk about seeing a small prick of light as they're in this tunnel and it gets bigger and bigger. Is that the case with you, or did you just come out into a
Uh,
light?
I saw, as I was moving towards the light, I saw like, was like maybe like the headlight of a motorcycle. And then all of a sudden I was inside of it. I mean, it happened quickly. Um, there wasn't a lot of time to think about things. Uh, all of that, once I was in the dark tunnel, I was still me, but I had left a lot of the thoughts and feelings behind. Um, there was just no pain, no concern, no worry. All of that just kind of got left behind. And being in the tunnel was comfortable and comforting. Being surrounded by that after the trauma of being blown up and having my face crushed in.
Yeah, and you say when you came out into the light is when you felt this unconditional love. You felt this joy that was incomparable to probably anything you could have ever felt here on planet Earth.
Absolutely. And anything that I felt subsequently. I mean, I've never again felt uh, on this planet that level of knowledge, comfort, unconditional love. Um, it was just the most astounding thing I had ever felt and experienced. Um, it was it's so hard to describe. Even after 55 years, and I've told this story so many times over the last 35 years, and yet it's still hard to find the words to describe what it felt like there, and how I've had several other experiences since then, and I've had similar feelings, but I was out in the universe and not here on this planet. At least my spirit was. My body never left the planet.
Yeah, many near-death experiencers talk about how ineffable and how difficult it is to describe this experience once they have an actual near-death experience. You then said you were met by a ball of energy, which formulated and it became a familiar figure to you, which was your grandfather, who you said spoke to you. Now, was this speaking audible or was it telepathic?
It was telepathic. Um, and it was almost more emotional than a verbal sense. It wasn't that he was talking to me in words. It was more like pictures and feelings and sensations. Um, Words didn't seem to have meaning, but I mean, I understood clearly what was being communicated, but it wasn't in English or in a language per se, um, that I had ever spoken or been familiar with before.
You also say that there was another energy of light that approached you, but this time you were not familiar with this particular figure. Did this ball of energy, like your grandfather, formulate into some sort of entity, or did it just look like a ball of energy?
It just looked like a big ball of energy. It was very bright white, even brighter than the light around me.
This particular energy that you saw approaching you, though, you said you felt that it was something higher and something greater, maybe almost, and it
Uh, More
commun.
evolved, yeah. I think that the energy beings evolve. I think that you've met somebody and you say, "Wow, that's an old spirit." Well, that's the evolution of this energy. It evolves to be a more highly functional, highly aware energy, and that it resides in certain people. Um, I've come to understand over time that this energy chooses what body it enters. Um, there's uh, it has the ability to choose, but once it chooses, it has to stay with that body until that body dies. But for the spirit, that's relatively insignificant period of time because I know it seems like we're here for a long time. I've been on this planet 75 years, and uh, it seems like a long time, but really it's not. It's a very short time. It's just a moment in time.
Um, you say though that this higher power entity then communicates to you that you have to go back. You can't stay. You can't stay in this place of peace, joy, and love. But when you do return, you will survive whatever you were going through. And at the time, it happened to be the Vietnam War. Now, when you come back, you said you are shrouded in this light still. It's almost as if you're in between life and death. You're still feeling some sort of bliss of that side, but you're still got the awareness of the earthly situation that's going on. And even though it's very harrowing, you're still not afraid to go through it because of this light that's surrounding you.
Using the light, yes. Um, in my book, I write about my near-death experience on the battlefield, but uh, I've had people say, "Well, why didn't you talk more about the near-death, or why wasn't it more about that near-death experience? Why did it stop there?" But it didn't. The near-death experience didn't stop. In fact, here I am 55 years later, and I'm still having that experience. It doesn't go away. It doesn't just vanish. Now you can forget about it because we're human beings and we have the capability of, you know, putting things on a shelf in the back of our mind and letting them go or forgetting to think about them. But they're still there. That near death experience for me is ongoing. It's still there. It never left. All throughout my recovery in hospitals, I spent um, uh, almost 2 years physically recovering in hospitals and getting surgeries and such, and plastic surgery to rebuild my face. Um, and all through that time, that white light was right there with me.
Yeah, and it sounds like you're referring to the after effects of your near-death experience. Many near-death experiencers talk about how a lot of times the spiritual realm is still a part of them, even more so after they've had their near-death experience. Once they've come back from that,
Yeah,
you said something earlier which I thought resonates very well with near-death experiencers as well. You said that unlike a dream or even like a hallucination, you remember this. This is like the memory retrieval for this for you is very simple and very easy because it's like etched into your mind. And that's mainly probably because this was an actual experience and not some sort of working of the brain like a dream is.
yeah.
Uh, when you had your near death experience, I like to ask this question very often to experiencers. Did it feel more real where you were over there than it was in Vietnam?
It did. I mean, it was, it was vibrant. It was all encompassing. It was fulfilling. Um, I mean, I've had lucid dreams before. Um, I dream a lot, but those lucid dreams, even the most lucid dream I've ever had, doesn't even come close to the near death experience. And the memory or the thought of it is always kind of at the forefront of my mind. It doesn't just go away. I can recall it whenever I need it. Um, and the story hasn't changed. The memory hasn't changed in 55 years. I can tell you that the dreams have changed and the memories of the dreams are long gone, most of them. Um, but not this. This is entirely different. And I'm kind of a show me person. I'm a little skeptical of things, until I can actually see it work. Um, but I'm not skeptical of this near death experience. I'm not skeptical of what happened. It's just too real. It's too much a part of who I am and understanding my spirit and my soul. It's understanding my place in the universe, how I fit with this energy in the universe, how I grow and advance. Like I said, I wasn't the brightest guy when I went in the military. In fact, in high school, I graduated at the bottom of my class. Um, it's not that I wasn't smart, I just wasn't a good student. But when I came home, after having the near death experience, I was hungry for knowledge. I went to college. Um, I got numerous degrees, uh, and I just, I just kept learning. I kept learning every day. I still do. I read a lot. I study a lot um, because it's so important to who we are and where we're going. And things that I've learned about why we're here, our purpose on this planet, why we exist. Um, and that's always been a question when I go speak publicly is, you know, why are we here? What purpose do we serve on this planet? And it's really very simple. Our purpose on this planet is to be the steward of the planet, to take care of the planet so that it can take care of us. If you think about the planet as, say, uh, a cell in your body, if a cell gets cancer or starts to die, it affects the entire body. So we have to keep it healthy and alive. It's the same way with the planet. If we let our planet die, if we don't take care of it, it will affect other planets in the universe and other solar systems, and it will have a ripple effect throughout the universe. So it's really important for us to take care of this planet and to make sure that we don't destroy it. Um, and not to destroy each other either. You know, I know a lot of people don't agree, socially or religiously or politically, but that doesn't mean we can't work together in making the planet a better place. If you want to have a different social or political or religious outlook than I have, then go ahead, have it. It's yours. You can own it. If it makes you feel good, do it. But don't destroy the people and don't destroy the planet.
And
We,
this is coming from someone who was in one of the longest, most bloodiest wars in American history.
yeah, we got to stop doing that crap. Let me tell you, we got to stop the warring. We've got to stop killing each other and maiming each other. And we used to say that the guys that died were the lucky ones. Um, and that might seem coarse and harsh, but when you've had to live with physical pain and physical disability for the rest of your life because of what happened to you in that war. And I can tell you that it's not just the physical injuries, it was the mental injuries as well.
And with that said, I know you are an author of a book. Why don't you give us the title of that book and where we can find it?
The book is If Morning Never Comes by Bill Vandenbush, and it's available on Amazon. And there's some other bookstores. Uh, I don't know what they are, but Amazon always has it. So uh, my publisher, he has connections with some bookstores and different places around the world, and so he uh, has it there. But Amazon for the people living in the U.S. is the place to go.
Well, Bill, I want to thank you for coming on Real Spiritual Talk Radio and sharing with us your absolutely fascinating account.
Well, thank you, Lamont. It was a joy. It was a joy to get to meet you. You seem like a really nice guy, and it was a pleasure to talk to you.
Same here. Thank you very much. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Bill Vandenbush.